It is really nice to have little helpers. Kaya just brought this big bucket in all by herself. Show me how heavy it is, honey. Pretty heavy, huh? It's really nice to have helpers who are big enough to help. So if you're new to canning, try to have somebody, or any kind of food processing, try to have somebody there that's done it before. They can walk you through it. And if you're used to it, then it's really nice to have little helpers, just because it saves your back, and it takes a little bit of brain power to get this done, so you need to not get tired. Make sure you have snacks like energy bars or cheese and stuff all prepped for you, so that you don't have to stop in the middle and your blood sugar doesn't get low, and stay hydrated. To keep the girls entertained while they're helping me, I will turn on an audio tape, and right now we are listening to
Mary Poppins.
Right now we're listening to Mary Poppins, and when it's just me that's doing it, I will listen to Paul Wheaton. But it really helps the kids to stay focused and entertained if they have audiobooks. I'm not sure how well that would work if we had a TV in our house, because this is major entertainment for my kids. But if they had TV, I don't know if that would be the case. This is a dough scraper. It's meant for scraping little pieces of dough and flour off of your cupboard after you make bread. However, it scrapes more than dough. If you have a countertop that you've been canning on, and you've got lots of stuck-on icky stuff that you can't get off very easily with your washcloth, this makes canning and butchering much easier in cleanup, because you can scrape up nasty stuff and then go over it with your washcloth and some baking soda. So I swear by this. I picked these apples in 2-gallon buckets. I prefer to keep them in the 2-gallon buckets because they are smaller, they are easier for me to lift, and since I'm the one processing them, that really counts. If I didn't have them in buckets, I would very carefully sterilize my sinks, scrub everything down, including the stoppers in the bottom. I would fill one sink up with cold water and maybe a little bit of chlorine. And then as I was finished, I would have a bowl here. And as I took one apple from here, I would probably rinse it off, make sure all the actual visible dirt comes off. I'm going to let these soak for a little bit. These are summer apples, and they do have some wormholes in them, but not very many. When it comes to applesauce and everything, you're steaming them. So they're very hot. Anything that's in them is going to get killed anyway, and because it's going through an applesauce maker, you're not going to know if you're getting a bug or not. So there's bugs in food. We eat bugs all the time. To me, it's not a real big deal. So these are summer apples, red Harland, and what was the other one they said? His winter apples are Sweet 16 and, was it Sweet 16? I think it's Sweet 16 and Red Harland are his winter apples. And I don't remember what his summer apples are. Darn it. Anyway, if you're really worried about what's on the surface of your apples, you can put a little chlorine in. I don't know if I'll do that with these or not. There was some bird manure on it from the trees, but not a lot. So we'll see. Okay, summer apples do not stay good. They have a very, very short shelf life. Without refrigeration, once they're picked, you've got like a couple days to get them done at most, especially if they got bruised. So don't get ahead of yourself, especially once they're washed, they can go bad. So do one batch meaning what will fit in your dehydrator and what will fit in your pot, one batch at a time. But keep the batches moving. Spend those days that you have doing up your apples. If they start to go bad really fast, what you can do is put them in 2-quart, 1-gallon size jars and put them in your fridge. Okay, once you have a bowl of clean washed apples, you're going to cut them in half because it allows the steam to get through the skin faster, so it cuts down your amount of time. You could just put them in whole and it would work. But having ruptured that skin makes it steam much faster. When you're doing applesauce or fruit leather or something else that requires mashed apples, you don't need any special equipment. All you need is a big pot with a couple inches of water in the bottom, and then you pack the apples in once they're clean into your pot, and then you steam them. I have this in the bottom to keep the apples on the bottom from burning, so it just holds them up off the actual pot base. And we will show you how we do that. Okay, you want to leave enough space in the top that you get a really good seal with your lid, because actually there's only 2 inches of water in the bottom of this. You're steaming the apples. You are not boiling the apples. If you try to boil the apples, you're going to have a lot of water in your applesauce. What you want is really good, strong applesauce, which means you steam them. Hot pack canners are like spaghetti. You don't put the spaghetti in until the water's boiling, and then you don't start counting your time until the water starts boiling again. So this is not ready. We are not boiling yet. It's almost simmering. Not boiling yet. When it starts to boil, I will turn the heat down so that it holds a simmer. Then I will fill my jars up, put the lids on, and I will put my jars in. And then I will wait to start my time until it starts boiling again, at which point, now remember, you don't want a rolling boil. You want the water moving so that it's just boiling. If you do a rolling boil, your jars are going to knock against each other. We are now boiling and we are ready to fill our jars. Are you focused in on what we're doing? Spring goes on this. This is the new one. I had the old one that took a little bit more practice to do. The reason I didn't like the old one is because of just how much aluminum there was. And this one has more plastic. If you don't want the plastic leaching into your food, then you need to do it cold. You don't have that much reaction if it's cold. However, I do it when it's hot because I want it to go through quickly. So I do get some leaching of plastic and aluminum into our food. So there's that. I'm going to turn it so
and
it'll
you
go
twist
on.
it.
Page. Okay, so put it on, turn it. Let's see if I can get it to the right spot. Paige, please don't lean on that.
No.
I've got to take that all the way out.
Do you need help?
Turn, and then clamp this down. This just hooks into the back.
Yep. And then you keep grinding when it's fixed.
The nice thing about the newer ones is that this just snaps on instead of having to make sure that everything is perfect. This just snaps on, which is really, really nice. The other one, it was like this huge jigsaw puzzle.
Huge jigsaw. Okay, I'm handling the camera.
There we go. So it just snaps on. And then this goes in like that. Smooth this over here.
It's almost the whole thing. And there's that.
Okay, so that's
goes
ready to go.
there.
You need a big, are you focusing or looking at your sister? You need a big low container here, and you need a smaller container here to catch the pulp. I like to dehydrate the pulp for the goats for winter treats. Push stop. Play with your consistency. My first batch was much, much thicker. This is just about perfect. I had to get a lot of water out of the bottom to use. And the way that you know that your apples are ready is that when you stick a fork in them, they just feel soft. They don't need to be mush to be done. They just need to be tender. And I do not put any kind of sweetener in my dried anything. I do not put honey. I don't put sugar. I don't put anything. Dried fruit is very high in sugar, which would be fructose. That's the fruit sugar. So yeah, you can give somebody a really bad case of diabetes just with dehydrated fruit leather and dehydrated fruit. So don't worry about adding sugar unless you really love sugar, I guess. But if the point of this is to have a healthier snack, don't put sugar in it. Okay, so when you're ready to be canning, you need a big ladle. I like the ones with the little lip on the side. You need this to pull out your hot jars. I like the little sticks with the magnets, but I can't find mine. I probably put it in a really safe place for canning, which I no longer remember. So this I use for pulling out my hot lids. This is my funnel keeps the sides of your jars clean. You'll also need a very clean washcloth or something else to wipe the rims of your jars to make sure you don't have applesauce on them. We've just got so many flies, it's driving me crazy. And then you need an up-to-date home canning and preserving book. I have this one marked with all my favorite recipes, and it will tell you, as per your altitude, how many minutes per quarts and for pints for the different kinds of food that you do. So make sure and get one of these. I use this all the time, even though it is 20 minutes for quarts and 15 minutes for pints in my area, as long as I'm capable of doing it in a hot pack canner rather than a pressure. The difference between a jar that's been used, a lid that's been used, and a lid that hasn't been used is look at the rim in there. You can see the line right along the rubber. See that line? That's from the rim of the jar. Okay, now let's see if we can catch. See? No rim. That's the difference between new lids and old lids. And I have a friend who uses these over again. I can't remember how she did it, but she did. And there's some new ones that are made that are BPA free as well. And I think they're called keepers, but I'm not exactly sure. But they're reusable every time. You just turn them over and that's how they do it. So anyway, that's the difference between new and old. Rings are not as important as lids. If they're rusty, it's not a big deal. This is how I store mine. You have the end one wrapped with string or whatever, and you have the first one wrapped with string, and then I have them down in my storage room, and that's where I keep them until I'm ready to use them, and this just hooks on to things. And I have the large rings and the small rings separate. And you can boil these too if you want to, but they don't actually come in contact with any food or anything, so I just keep them clean instead of sterilizing. Okay. I want to show you how hard it is for me to get my hand in here. I cannot get my hand in here, and I have very small hands. So again, I use these as Ziplocs, like Tupperware containers, because I prefer to use glass, and so I use these for everything. I need to be able to get my hand into them to clean them. Once I have them clean, I fill them with hot water in the rinse water. Make sure to check along the rim of each one that you don't have a chip. You just run along it with your finger. And they have to stay hot, because what's going in them is going to be hot, and then they're going into something else hot. You don't want your jars cracking. Try to have them all be the same size mouths, but I have run out of jars, so I have one that's a wide mouth. And make sure to always fill up your hot pack canner all the way. This particular hot pack canner takes 8 jars, so I need to have 8 jars ready to go. When you store your jars, only store them clean, and make sure that you put a lid on them. So I feel a little iffy about using these jars because I didn't put a lid on them. I thought they'd be safe away from mice, but I did get a mouse in it, which is really gross. So now I've got to sterilize these jars really well. So you can just use old lids and turn them upside down so that the rubber is not in contact with the jar lid, because it'll leave a residue sometimes. And then just put them on, put the lid rings on. It doesn't matter if the rings are rusty. And always keep your boxes, because jars always transport best in a box. They don't clink as much. You have 1/2 inch headspace, which means the distance from the top of the jar to the applesauce that's in it is 1/2 inch. So then I take a wet finger and run it along. Make sure that I don't have any applesauce on my jar. I get my lid, which is quite warm, and then I remember that I forgot to get rings. So I gotta get a ring. Put the ring on, not terribly tight, but snug. Usually what you've got in there is way too hot to be touching the jar as much as I am, but I just reheated this so it's not as hot as it normally is. Put this in. I like these ones where all you have to do is have a holding point. The other ones you have to actually squeeze. This one you don't have to squeeze. So you see those spaces? Can you see the spaces? You probably can't see the bucket or the basket, but you place it in the space in the basket, and then everything else goes around that circle. And you can see it's not boiling. I turned it down so that it would stop boiling. So now I'm going to turn it up. I want it to stay simmered so it doesn't take a long time for it to come back up to heat. If, however, it starts to do a rolling boil, turn it back down because it's hard on the jars.